Well, thousands of Egyptians are tonight still defying a supposedly strict curfew and demanding the resignation of President Hosni Mubarak. As the army was deployed on the streets in greater numbers on the fifth day of unrest, the numbers killed continue to rise. Hoping to quell the protests, the president sacked his cabinet and then named his first ever vice president. But his promise of reform failed to placate the thousands of protesters across the country. In Cairo, 3 people died after being shot trying to storm the Egyptian Interior Ministry and Central Bank before being forced back by the army. Thousands more ignored the curfew in Alexandria, where reports claimed that police had fired live ammunition against protesters. Demonstrators also took to the streets of Suez, Damanhur, Ismailia and Beheira. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman reports from Cairo.
Come and join us, they shouted, angry Egyptians on this 5th day of protest, refusing to stop until Hosni Mubarak is no longer their president. An angry crowd today paraded the body of a protester who'd been killed in clashes with police. At least 3 were reported killed in the capital today, and the higher the death toll, the louder the cries for change. Last night, we watched Mubarak's party headquarters go up in smoke. The tanks deployed below it could do nothing to stop it. And despite the curfew, motorists parked along the Nile to watch. This uprising now a drive-by event, a spectator sport. By morning, the party was signalling its distress across the capital. Its claims of winning 93% of the vote going down in flames. The bureaucracy of power fluttering on the breeze. Ancient Egypt, though not as ancient as the museum next door, slightly scorched but otherwise intact. The army smiled at the protesters, who threw the soldiers supplies, and jubilant thousands headed into Freedom Square. Down, down, down with the regime, they shouted. We want the president to go. We're now in Freedom Square in Cairo. The riot police and the secret police seem to have disappeared. The army are on the streets and there's a mood of celebration. It's almost as if the soldiers are with the people rather than with the president. Everywhere we looked, Egyptians reveling at their own audacity, at history in the making. The odd tourist was caught up in the mayhem. I like to see you using your gun.
Well, I'm just looking at a map, you know, like where am I, and look at all this happening. Yeah.
And the city is littered with carnage from the night before. Riot police vehicles firebombed in a rebellion which forced them off the streets. With the army here, today felt like a new beginning. The demonstrators so confident that the soldiers would not shoot them that they had lost all fear.
Today is the last day for Hosni Mubarak. He lost to go to Saudi Arabia, to leave.
Please don't stay with us, Mr. Mubarak. We don't need you. We don't need you.
This afternoon, a new cabinet was announced and a senior party official quit. But it didn't stem the human flow. It's now 2 o'clock and thousands of people are still marching towards Freedom Square, even though the curfew begins in a couple of hours. And a lot of them are telling us they won't go home, whatever the army, whatever the president says. The curfew starts in a couple of hours. What are you going to do?
Nothing. We're staying. We're not going anywhere. They can come and kill us. Who cares? We're dead anyhow. If I go home, I'm dead. If I stay here, I'm dead. Psychological death is worse than physical death. Let them come and kill us.
But the army may open fire.
Well, that's it then. So what? So what? They're down. They're down. They don't know what to do.
Despite reports of scores dead from yesterday's violence, a protest organizer who was himself beaten by police can scarcely believe what his people have done.
We managed to mobilize the people, and the people are on. They're out there.
They don't need you anymore.
No. We are useless now. They can shoot us. It's fine. The people are out. They will not go back home.
How do you feel about what you've done?
I had tears in my eyes. I'm so proud of this country now.
Tonight, the president was shown on television, swearing in his intelligence chief, Omar Suleiman, as first vice president, with the head of the army as second in charge. So it's all changed then, apart from the president himself, who is still refusing to quit. Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News, Cairo.
Well, just after that curfew began, I spoke to New York University's Professor Khalid Fahmy, who had joined protesters in Tahrir Square in central Cairo. I asked him to describe what was going on around him.
I am seeing thousands and thousands of people. More and more people are coming. They are shouting anti-Mubarak slogans. The army has some presence here in Tahrir Square. Maybe I can count only 10 or 15 armored vehicles, maybe 4 or 5 tanks. The people are jumping on top of these vehicles with no opposition from the soldiers. The soldiers at one moment even carried anti-Mubarak placards. The army is supposed to impose a 4 o'clock curfew, which passed 20 minutes ago, and we have not seen any serious effort to do so.
Is the world watching a revolution in Egypt?
This is a huge revolution. It cuts across class. It cuts across geographic areas. It has a very specific demand for a change of the regime. Mubarak changed the government yesterday. That was obviously not enough.
Only the removal of Mubarak will bring this process to an end.
It is now very clear that he has to go. Nothing less than this would placate and pacify the people here.
Well, Jonathan Rugman joins us now from central Cairo. Jonathan, well, from the picture behind you, snapshot though it is, it looks pretty tranquil. What's the wider picture in Cairo tonight?
The wider picture, Alex, is that within the last few seconds we've heard gunfire, what sounds like live gunfire, and a source of ours in Freedom Square is saying that scores of people have been injured in the last few minutes with stabbings, apparently, as well as firing in the square. There were thousands of people, as your previous speaker just said, camped in the square defying the curfew. We're also hearing that neighbourhood watch groups have been set up in suburbs by people who are worried about looting. But politicians, opposition politicians and protesters have told us that the government is instigating trouble deliberately, that it is trying to sow chaos in the hope that the people part company with the protesters and that the protests stop. We've also, since my report was filed, received pictures of damage inside the world-famous Antiquities Museum, of broken ancient artifacts. Apparently what happened, according to TV reports here, is that 9 looters went into the museum. They have been described as policemen, police guards, and were apparently caught. The damage was done, though I gather that it did not take place in one of the main halls of the museum.
And what about the man that some call the last pharaoh of Egypt, the big man himself, Hosni Mubarak? Well, he's certainly reshuffled the deck, but it's still his own people put in place by him, right?
Yes, that's right. I said in my report that it felt like a new beginning with the sort of jubilant scenes and the tanks on the streets. If these latest reports about shootings and stabbings are to believe, that's very, very quickly changed. I think it's a battle of wills going on here. On the one hand, you've got a president shoring himself up with a new vice president and another vice president coming from the army. And on the other hand, you've got the protesters on the streets who are banking on the army siding with them. And it's really the army's decision what it wants to do. Either it sides with the president and feels that he is a guarantee of stability, or it sides with the people who are on the streets.
Jonathan Rugman there in Cairo. Clearly a fast-moving situation. We'll bring you more from that city as and when we get it.